Welcome to the Explainer. So, what if the ultimate goal of the spiritual journey, enlightenment itself, what if it's actually a trap? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical idea that turns the whole path to liberation completely on its head.
Okay, so this provocative claim comes from a yoga and meditation teacher, a guy with about 50 years of experience under his belt. And he's arguing that what so many people see as the ultimate prize, that state of samadhi, of total oneness, is not actually liberation. Instead, it's the final frontier, the most difficult challenge to overcome.
So how can the ultimate spiritual experience be a trap? I mean, it sounds crazy, right? Well, that's the central mystery we're going to unpack today. And we'll do it by following a really personal story that challenges conventional spiritual wisdom, suggesting that what we think is the summit might just be a ledge before the real peak.
All right, the puzzle begins with the speaker's own journey, and it starts young. You see, while most people dedicate their entire lives to spiritual practice, he just kind of stumbled into samadhi. We're talking about a profound state of spiritual consciousness, and he did it with baffling ease, as a teenager, no less. So after just 2 months of chanting a simple mantra, he spontaneously fell into the state of, unconscious bliss. No guru, no formal initiation, none of the years and years of struggle you always hear about, just 2 months of chanting, and bam, he was hit by this wave of ecstasy so intense he literally couldn't speak for an hour afterwards. It was so direct, so effortless that he himself didn't really get it for years.
So what normally stops people from reaching this state? I mean, to really appreciate how unusual his experience was, we need to look at the common roadblocks on the spiritual path. Why do so many people struggle for decades to get a glimpse of what he fell into in just 2 months?
Well, according to yogic tradition, it all comes down to what they call the 3 knots. These are basically a series of spiritual blockages, these energy constrictions in the body. You can think of them like giant dams that prevent the free flow of your life force energy, your kundalini, and block you from reaching higher consciousness. So these knots are located at really key energy centers along the spine. The first one is down at the root chakra, and it blocks our primal survival energy. The second is at the heart chakra, blocking our emotional attachments. And the third, and this is the big one, is at the third eye, blocking all our intellectual and egoic belief systems. Breaking through these is a huge, often really difficult achievement.
Now, what's really interesting is the contrast here, because his experience just flies in the face of the typical tough journey. For most people, it requires years, decades of dedicated practice. You often need a guru's initiation just to break these knots. It can be a really intense struggle. But for him, he achieved samadhi in 2 months, never had a formal initiation, and experienced 0 blockages or negative side effects. It just happened.
And to give you an idea of just how tough these knots can be for the average person, he gives this example from his own healing work. It took him 18, that's 1/8, full 1-hour sessions just to help one client break the heart knot, just the second one. That shows you how stubborn these things can be.
Which brings us to the big question. How could his knots have already been gone at age 19? I mean, if he didn't untie them in this life, and he didn't have a guru do it for him, how was the path so wide open? Well, this leads to a single, logical explanation that really reframes his entire life story. And this brilliantly illustrates the breakthrough realization he had. See, according to the theory of yoga, whatever spiritual level you manage to attain, you don't lose that level when you're reborn. You just continue from where you left off. His progress, he realized, wasn't from this life.
So his conclusion was pretty clear. He must have had his knots broken and reached a high spiritual level in a past life. This whole idea of reincarnation became the only plausible answer to the mystery of his effortless samadhi.
But if he'd already reached the summit, why was he reborn? This is where it gets really interesting, because this leads to the final revelation. If he'd already done all the hard work, why come back? This is what builds to his most important point, and it goes way beyond just the experience of oneness.
So he explains that even beyond the knots, the journey continues through what are called the 5 sheets, or koshas. Think of them as 5 layers of our being that you have to transcend. You go through the physical body, the energy body, the mind body, the wisdom body, until you finally get to the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body.
And this final layer, this bliss body, is the experience of samadhi. And the bliss level is, in his words, like an atom bomb of ecstasy. It's so overwhelming, so powerful, that you almost have to say, stop. It's an ocean of bliss that can feel like just too much.
And this, right here, is the false summit. So the crucial point he makes is that many people mistake this overwhelming bliss, this feeling of oneness, as the final goal. But it's not. It's a trap.
He argues the ultimate challenge, the final test, is to experience that oneness and not get trapped by the ego that comes with it. The false summit is just merging with everything, but the true goal is returning from that oneness to relate to the everything. See, in that bliss state, the final ego emerges, this feeling of I am God. The real challenge is to surrender that final ego and come back to a life of worship and relationship.
So the true liberation, he states, is choosing to be the worshiper, not the worshipped. Instead of just dissolving into the ocean for good, the goal is to return as the drop. But now you have this profound, personal relationship to that ocean.
And he uses this famous poem, Footprints in the Sand, to illustrate the ultimate relationship he's talking about. You probably know it. It's that idea that when you're at your lowest, it's not a relationship of equals. It's one where a loving creator is literally carrying you through your hardest times. My child, I did not abandon you. I carried you at that time.
So what should you take away from this? Well, here are the big ideas. First, peak spiritual states like samadhi might not be the end goal, but a final test. Second, that feeling of I am God can be the last and most subtle ego trap you'll face. Third, the idea that progress from past lives could explain these spiritual prodigies. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the journey might not be about becoming the divine, but about forming a relationship with the divine.
And that's our explainer for today. It really leaves you with a question that sits at the very heart of the spiritual quest, doesn't it? Is the ultimate goal of spirituality to become everything or to relate to the everything? Is it to dissolve into the ocean or to be the single drop that chooses to love it back?